We created a database and configured our Rails project to connect to it. Next, we need to add tables. We will do that by writing Rails migrations. A migration is a set of database instructions. Those instructions are Ruby code which migrates our database from one state to another. Essentially, they describe database changes. In our migration, we can create a table, add a column, change the name of a column, drop a table, and much more. A migration will contain both the instructions for moving up to a new state and also instructions for moving back down to the previous state. If a migration has instructions to create a table when moving forward or up, it will also include the instructions to allow it to move back down by dropping the table. If you move up by adding 3 columns to a table, then you will also have instructions to move back down by removing those 3 columns. Being able to move in both directions like this allows us to migrate in both directions. We can migrate our database to the newest version or migrate back to a previous version. Why use migrations? Migrations maintain our database schema with our application code. Our application depends on having the database in a particular state. Since they're closely coupled, we want to make sure that the description of the database is stored right alongside our application code. Because the instructions are written down, we can execute them anytime and they're repeatable. Let's imagine that I take my project to a new computer and I want to recreate the database there. Now I don't have to export the database and then re-import it. All I have to do is run my migrations, and those will put the new database in the same state. Another benefit of migrations is that we can share database changes with other developers. Imagine 2 developers are working on a project together. If one developer adds a column to one of the tables and writes code that depends on that column, the other developer is going to need to also add a column to their table to keep the code working. If they share the migration file, the developer can run the migrations and keep their databases in sync. Migrations also help with versioning. If you're using a version control system like Git or Subversion, you can check out a previous revision of the code and then migrate your database to put it in the same state that the code expects. Migrations also allow us to write Ruby code instead of writing SQL. We can still write SQL if we prefer, but Ruby gives us handy, easy-to-remember tools that keep us from having to look up the SQL syntax. And using Ruby, migrations have access to our Rails application code. That becomes useful if we need migrations that depend on the data that's already in our application. Maybe I want to add a new column and pre-populate it with data from another table. However, I have to also admit that migrations are not a perfect solution. There are issues with sharing schemas, with making changes to existing migrations, or with getting the database into a state where migrations won't run up or down until you manually tinker with them. But developing using migrations is much better than developing without them. They will definitely make working with databases a lot easier for you. Let's see how we can create migrations.